Mic'd up.
Welcome, everybody. We are flying solo today. Ezra, or Adam, as some people like to call him, is on assignment as I have technology issues. My co host today is actually Otis, as you can see. Oh, there he is. Otis the dog. He is the most intelligent co host I have ever had. I am flying solo for today's show, and it should be a relatively quick one because I only have one thing I want to talk about. And that would be my friend and yours, Aaron Judge. Don't want to talk about the stupidity that is the Yankees lineup not playing Austin Wells 2/3 of the games and then listening to people like Michael Kay say that you can't play a catcher every game while citing Thurman Munson and other guys who used to catch 130 games a season, which is much more than 2 out of every 3 games. But we'll leave that out. Anyhow, here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Mr. Aaron Judge. So, welcome to the show. Woo, boy, I'm having technology issues today. I don't know what the heck is going on. There we go. Hopefully that stays how it's supposed to stay. So, Aaron Judge, what's he doing so far this year? All right, he's played 132 games, 590 plate appearances, 51 home runs, 123 RBIs. How does that project out? It projects out to 62 homers, which would tie his own American League record, and 160 RBIs. He's currently hitting .333 with an on base of .467, slugging of .731, an OPS of 1.198, which also gives him an OPS plus of 229. Pretty damn good season. And how does that compare to his 22 season when he hit the 62 home runs? In that season, he played 157 games, which is about the pace he's on now, a little bit less. He had 696 plate appearances. He'll probably have a couple of more than that this year. He had 62 home runs and only 131 RBIs. And all of this after hitting less than 200 in the month of April, when everybody was worried about the fact that he was on the downside. So that is a pretty interesting season. Also, one of the things I want to talk about is his walks. He's got 110 of them so far, and him and Soto are battling it out to see who's going to have the most walks in baseball. He's on a pace for 135. And then something else that I thought was interesting, because living here in the Bay Area, we know that Barry Bonds was intentionally walked, even with the bases loaded, by Buck Showalter. And Judge has only been intentionally walked 16 times, which means he'll be intentionally walked about 19 times during the season, which would be exactly the same as the number of times he was intentionally walked when he hit 62 home runs in 22. He's on a pace for 135 walks, and he only had 111 in 2022. So he is having a better year than he had in 2022 when he had an MVP season. So let's talk about MVP for the time being right now, because everybody was jumping up and down there for a while. Oh, Bobby Witt Jr., Bobby Witt Jr., or Gunnar Henderson, Gunnar Henderson. Let me say, neither one of them has a shot at the MVP. And I would say, even if Judge doesn't play another game the rest of the season, Judge is going to win the MVP. Why is that? Well, let's talk about Gunnar first, because he's fallen on some hard times, which has cost my fantasy team. His batting average is down to 280. His on base is very good at 366, but not in the same league as Judge. His slug is at 538, which is very good, but not in the same league as Judge or in Bobby Witt. And his OPS is 904 with an OPS plus of 158. So he's not in the same league as Judge. What is Bobby Witt Jr. done? He's leading the league in batting average at 346, but he was at 360 for a really long time. Got into a little bit of a slump, and now he seems to be leveling off and hitting in that 333 neighborhood for the last week or so. His on base is only 399, which compares to Judge's 467, and his slugging is 618 compared to Judge's 731, which, by the way, Judge's slugging is almost 30 points higher than the Major League Baseball average of OPS. So Judge's OPS is 1198, which puts him at an OPS plus of 229. Witt's only at 177. Yes, Witt has 27 stolen bases over Judge's 12, but with 28 homers and 95 RBIs, which projects out to 34 and 115, I think there's a better chance of Judge winning the Triple Crown and beating out Witt with regard to batting average and winning the MVP, of course, with Judge than there is of Witt winning the MVP. I don't think there's a comparison right now. As a matter of fact, I think there's a better chance Marcell Ozuna wins the Triple Crown than there is for Bobby Witt to win the MVP. Marcell Ozuna in the National League is 1 point behind Luis Ariz. He's hitting 309. Ariz is at 310. Ozuna is 4 home runs behind Ohtani and is leading the National League in RBIs. So Marcell Ozuna, we might have 2 Triple Crown winners possibly this season. But Judge has the AL MVP in the bag. If anybody thinks otherwise, they must live in Kansas City or have a bias against the Yankees. People are going to say, oh, Judge has Soto in front of him. Well, Kansas City's got a pretty good offense, not just Perez and Bobby Witt, but those guys have been scoring a lot of runs. They play a good style of baseball. As a matter of fact, one could argue the lineup around Bobby Witt is better than the lineup around Judge, especially when you've got DJ LeMahieu hitting at the Mendoza line and Alex Verdugo hitting below the Mendoza line for the last 2 months. The Yankees insisting on benching Wells, who actually has been very good, batting behind Judge in the cleanup slot. Stanton, who has stopped hitting even after he came back from the injured list a little bit hotter than he normally does. So I don't see a chance that Judge is not going to win the MVP. If any of you guys think otherwise, be sure to leave me a message, but there's no way in hell that I'm going to agree with you. Not that I ever would agree with you anyhow, because I don't like any of you. And I'm sure there's only 3 listeners, if that, since I'm doing this at 10 o'clock in the morning, my time. So let's look at Judge now as the all-time stats and see what we got going as far as where does Judge stand in the all-time seasons. How is he doing? All right. So he's got 62 home runs he's on the pace for. That would be exactly the same as he had in 2022, which would be an American League record. I think he's going to have a tough time getting that because the Yankees schedule down toward the end of the season, they're going to be battling against teams that are fighting for some playoff spots. And I think they might pitch around Judge a little bit more than they have been. Why teams have not been pitching around Judge more, I'm having a little bit of difficulty in understanding, but I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that although the Yankees seem to lead the league in on-base percentage and runs scored, they're second behind the Cleveland Guardians, the Yankees don't score a lot of runs except in individual games. Most of the Yankees games are like the ones that they just lost to the Nationals. 5-2, 6-2, 7-3, 7-0, 5-0. When they lose, they don't score. When they win, they have a tendency to beat the crap out of teams and score a lot of runs. So, while I think run differential is an important stat, I think it's overrated, especially with this Yankee team because they are so streaky with regard to when they hit and when they don't hit. And I think that's going to kill them in the playoffs once again. But that's what we talked about last week, and I'm sure we'll talk about again throughout the month of September. So I think they don't pitch around Judge as much as they should because the games aren't close. And then teams like the Nationals, who cares? What do they care? Let their pitchers like Mackenzie Gore, who is a stud left-hander, see what he can do against Judge. Because it doesn't really matter if the Nationals win or lose the game. It's not going to make a difference on their playoffs or not making the playoffs. The same would hold true with a lot of other teams, including, the Toronto Blue Jays and a lot of the teams in the National League West, like the A's, where the Yankees are coming out to visit in September, and the Angels, who also, don't care if they win or lose the games. So we'll see what happens. I don't know why they don't pitch around Judge more in the games that matter, but really, most of the guys sitting behind Judge don't hit, and they seem to really create sawdust with their hands and their nerves in any of these close games because the Yankees seem to not score as many runs. Anyhow, so Judge will be near the American League record for home runs at 62. I'm not going to talk about the Major League record. I'm not going to talk about Sosa. I'm not going to talk about McGuire's home run record. And I'm going to talk about some of Bonds' records, but really, we all know that's tainted. I know I'm out here in the Bay Area and people don't like to hear that, but you know what? Screw him. Bonds was on steroids when he was setting those records in San Francisco, and McGuire and Sosa clearly were on steroids. I want to get to one of my first comments because I think I addressed the issue by accident before I even saw the comment. This is from Rob Weber. Let's see what Mr. Weber has to say.
Mike, I'm curious what you think about the fact that pitchers aren't pitching around Judge as much as they should. I realize Soto's in that lineup, and I get all that. But at the same time, why would you ever let Aaron Judge beat you when you have a Yankee lineup that is subpar at best outside of the two superstars? What do you think?
So actually, I think I answered his question. I think I agree with him. The subpar lineup behind Judge, except for Soto in front of him, and the occasional Wells is hot, but God forbid they play him every day, and Stanton is up and down. Um, I think the reason that they pitched to Judge is because the games aren't close. Yankees either win big or can't score runs because the guys behind Judge are not doing anything. If I was a team, I might think about not pitching to Judge in the first inning to see what the Yankees are going to get out of the second half of their lineup. And if the Yankees' second half of the lineup hits, the Yankees are going to win because they have decent pitching and they're going to keep the other teams down. It's rare that the Yankees allow more than 5 runs in a game, but it's not rare that when the second half of the lineup hits, the Yankees are going to score more than 5 runs. So I think that they should be pitching around Judge in the early innings, the first and second, well, first and third innings when he gets up to see what's going on. And if the Yankees aren't hitting that day, why pitch to him? But the second half of that is who cares if you're the Washington Nationals or the Oakland, Sacramento, Las Vegas A's? You don't care if your teams win or lose. You want to see what kind of sack your pitchers have and whether or not they can actually handle pitching to a guy like Judge. So why pitch around them if the game result really doesn't matter? That's why I think they don't pitch around Judge as much. I think when the Giants were really good and Bonds was getting all those intentional walks, which I'll talk about in a little bit, I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that the Giants were battling to make the playoffs with the teams that they were playing against, the Dodgers, um, the Diamondbacks, and some of the other teams. Really were trying to make the playoffs with less teams making the playoffs back then. There really was a fight to see who was going to get in and why pitch to Bonds when the only trouble in the Giants lineup back then was Jeff Kent. Although Rich Aurelia had a couple of good years and Brandon Crawford was a better player, I think, early in his career when he was there, I think, when Bonds was at the end of his career. Um, we'll see what happens. But, I think he might get some more intentional walks, but he's going to come nowhere near the intentional walk records that Bonds set. Matter of fact, if I wanted to talk about the intentional walk records or even just walk records as themselves, Barry Bonds walked 232 times. 232 times in 2004. That's a lot. 198 times in 2002, 177 times in 2001, and then Babe Ruth had 170 in 1923. And then the next highest was McGwire in 1998 when he was going crazy. He had 162. So the Yankee record is 170, not in any danger whatsoever. I don't think Judge is going to get to 170 walks. His projected walk total is only going to get up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 135, which would put him third all time for the Yankees, behind Ruth, who was fourth all time in baseball and 11th all time in baseball in 1920, where he had 150. So I don't think Judge is going to come anywhere near the walk totals of those guys. With regard to other stats that Judge is trying to go up against, on base percentage. Again, Barry Bonds has the record from 2004, the same year he walked 232 guys. He has 609 on base percentage. Judge right now, his on base percentage is at 469. 467. Obviously, on base percentage projects out exactly the same over the course of the remaining games that Judge has. The other people at the top on the on base percentage is Bonds at number 2 at 581. And then from the number 2 to number 10, those were all before 1960, much less 1940 even. Bonds was 10th at 529 and then 16th at 515. The Yankee record is Ruth at number 7 overall at 545, which he had in 1923. Judge has a slight chance, but really probably not going to get anywhere close to even Ruth's number 15 all time at 516. So Judge's on base percentage, even though it's higher than it was in 2022, it's not going to be anywhere near the top 20 all time in Major League Baseball. But he's still having a great year. So he's not going to make the top 20 in Major League Baseball for on base percentage or walks. It's going to possibly break the American League record for home runs or come close to it. What other stats can that can Judge look at? And a lot of the things he's chasing are Barry Bonds records, and those are somewhat tainted, I would say. RBI, let's talk about OPS plus. Judge's current OPS plus is 229. That's unbelievable. His OPS plus was only 210 in 2022. The all-time record for OPS plus is misleading because it was Josh Gibson in 1943 at 281. And then 1937, he had a 273 OPS plus, but he only had 302 plate appearances and 183 plate appearances in those two seasons. So he didn't play a full schedule. Of course, it was 1943 and 1937. He wasn't even playing in what would be considered Major League Baseball. He was playing in the old Negro leagues because there was no integration yet. So their seasons were a lot shorter. But that just goes to show you how good Josh Gibson was, because even when he got to Major League Baseball, and the other Negro League players got to Major League Baseball, there are a lot of Major League Baseball Negro League players that are in the Hall of Fame, and deservedly so. So you look at the number 3 OPS player, and that's Bonds again in 2002. And that's not even the year he walked 220 times, did walk 198. His 2002 OPS plus was 268. And then in 2004, he was at 263. And 2001, he was at 259. And then that's the 5th best all time, which really is 1, 2, and 3 for Major League Baseball, where you had the traditional 600 or so plate appearances. And then from the number 5 slot to the number 2 slot, all of them from 1941 or earlier. And Bonds is then there again at number 22 back in 2003, where he had a 231 OPS plus, which Judge does have a chance of reaching, which would mean Judge is going to be near the top 20 in all-time OPS plus. If he stays at 229, where he is today, he would be 23rd all-time. Ruth's record is 1920, where he was at 255, and he was also 14th overall in 1921 and 1923 at 239. So Judge has a chance to be top 20 in the history of baseball, including old Negro League stats, in OPS plus. And I think OPS plus is a good reflection of how good Judge is compared to the players he's playing against, because OPS plus has to do with the players you're playing against in the current season. This is not his career OPS plus. This is his OPS plus in the season that he is currently playing. And for him to have a top 20 or top 25 OPS plus in the history of baseball is an amazing stat. I mean, you're talking over 120 years of Major League Baseball playing, and he's going to have a top 25 season in the history of baseball in OPS plus. The other stat that I think is really good to look at to compare the type of season Judge is having, not necessarily career, would be WAR. Individual season WAR is how are you wins above replacement against the other players playing in the same season you're playing. The all-time record is Babe Ruth in 1923. He also had the second best in 1921 and third best in 1927. Surprised me to not see Bonds in those spots, but Ruth was 14-1, 12-9, and 12-6 in 23, 21, and 27. The other thing that shocked me was 4th all-time WAR was 1967. Carl Yastrzemski at 12.4. That was the year he won the Triple Crown. It's also the year that he won the Triple Crown batting just about 300. And that's when they started to think about moving the mound to a lower level because pitching was so dominant. So that's the most impressive thing I found in doing this research was Carl Yastrzemski as the 4th best wins above replacement in an individual season at 12.4. Roger Hornsby was next in 1924 to 12.1. And then you get Barry Bonds, who was 6th in 2002 at 11.7. So you have two true modern day players, Yaz in 1967 and Bonds in 2002, who were up there in the top 6 all time. Judge is currently at 9.8 of his WAR. WAR does project out where he would be continuing to get a higher WAR over the course of the season. And if he continues to project out and keep improving his WAR at the current status that he's at, Judge will have a WAR of 12.0, which will put him in the 6th best WAR all time in an individual season. Again, 120 plus seasons of Major League Baseball. You're talking about a guy who's going to finish in the top 5 or 6 all time in the stat of wins above replacement. And he will beat Barry Bonds, which surprised me that Bonds' best season for WAR was only 11.7. So talking again here, you're talking about a guy who's having an all-time great season. Not just a great season, but an all-time great season when you look at the stats and you start comparing him to the players that he's playing against in the season he's playing. So you don't have to worry about comparing Babe Ruth to Aaron Judge or Rogers Hornsby or Ted Williams to Babe Ruth. You don't have to compare those things because this is Aaron Judge against his contemporaries. It's Barry Bonds against his contemporaries. Steroids or no steroids. And you're talking about a guy who's going to finish in the top 25 in OPS plus and a top 5 or 6 in wins above replacement. That's unbelievable. There was another stat that I came across beside the Yaz stat that was the most ridiculous stat that I found, and I thought this was incredible. Joe DiMaggio, Joe DiMaggio, in the year 1941 when he beat Ted Williams, and Ted Williams hit 407, but DiMaggio won the MVP in 1937. He had 167 RBIs. But what was more amazing is he had 76 walks, which is not a high walk total, but he had 13 strikeouts. The guy struck out 13 times in a season. He had a 56 game hitting streak, 167 RBIs, and he only struck out 13 times. That's something we'll never see again. So you start talking about RBIs, right? And what is Judge doing and how's he doing and how's he going to stand as far as RBIs, which again, if you look at it in an all-time record standpoint, RBIs in a season, it's a little bit of a misleading stat, especially this year. Judge has had more men on base than any player in history for the amount of games that he's played this season. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that Juan Soto has an an on-base percentage near 460 himself. But when you look at the RBI records, you got Hack Wilson had 191. I don't think that's ever going to be touched. Lou Gehrig has the Yankee record at 185 in 1931. I don't think that has a chance of being touched. Hank Greenberg, 1937, 184, and Jimmy Fox in 1938 had 175. These are ridiculous numbers that I don't think anybody's going to touch again. The Yankee record again, Gehrig had 185. In 1927, Murderers Row season, he had 173. He also had 173 in 1930. Babe Ruth in 1921, which was just before Gehrig joined the team, he had 168. And then Joe DiMaggio had 167 in 1937. With Judge on a pace for 100 and what is his pace? His pace is for 160 RBIs. So since 1960, the most RBIs any player has had is Manny Ramirez. In 1999, he had 165. Sammy Sosa in 2001 had 160. So you're talking about the modern era. Judge will have in the top 5 likely RBI totals of all time. Sosa also had 158 and 98, as did Juan Gonzalez, had 157 in that same year. And then A-Rod had 156 in 2007. Now you go down that list, you got Manny Ramirez, who was found guilty of taking fertility drugs, and which was considered performance enhancing. I don't know how Manny Ramirez creating more eggs so that he can get pregnant was performance enhancing, but I'm no doctor. Sammy Sosa, clearly steroids. He's willing to admit that he never did steroids in English, but when they asked him and he said he would go pee in a cup right now and get steroid tested, all of a sudden he didn't speak English. Sammy Sosa again, steroids. And then Juan Gonzalez, there's stories about Pudge Rodriguez and Juan Gonzalez, much more so about Pudge Rodriguez on those Rangers teams. But Juan Gonzalez has got a little bit of taint on him. And I don't mean the taint that's, on your body. I mean, he's got a little bit of taint that he may or may not have done performance enhancing drugs. And then, of course, A-Rod in 2007 has admitted that he was using performance enhancing drugs. So Judge has a chance to have a modern era record number of RBIs if he can get past Manny Ramirez's 165, which will require him going at a better pace than he's at now. But he's clearly going to be in the top 5 all time since 1960. And really, as big as he is, there's no steroid stories around Aaron Judge. So again, an all-time season for Judge. All-time season for Judge on all of these stats. So let's see what somebody else has to say here. Matt Shale seemed to chime in and miss the topic, but he keeps yelling about something going on with the Mets, but I'll let him spew as much as he wants to spew. He's a little frustrated, and as well as, just his personal social life as far as getting dates and getting some. I think he's personally a little challenged there as well. So I'll let him get his baseball frustrations out here.
Edwin Diaz, Edwin Diaz, Edwin Diaz, Edwin Diaz, Jeremy Familia, Armando Benitez, John Franco, Skip Lockwood. Bottom of the eighth inning last night in Arizona. Bottom of the ninth inning Sunday night in San Diego. These are the reasons why I don't gloat when the Mets go on a winning streak. These are the reasons why I get more work done in non-playoff contending seasons. Thanks, Mike.
So Matt Shale is bitching and moaning about the closer situation for the Mets. And he went back as far as Skip Lockwood. I mean, I don't know why he didn't reach back to Bob Apodaca, but that's a different story. Um, Quite frankly, as bad as Edwin Diaz may have been this season, he's 1 year removed from his freak injury. The Yankees still have a closer who's blown more saves. As a matter of fact, the Washington Nationals have been bitching and moaning about Kyle Finnegan, and he's 34 for 37 in save situations, even though he walks a tightrope every time. And the Yankees have had Clay Holmes, who's blown 10 saves, and it would have almost blew an 11th with a 3-0 lead the other day. 10 saves. If he wins 5 of those, which is still, not the best percentage of 5 blown saves, the Yankees are, 3 games in first place ahead of the Orioles. So, I have empathy for him and his Met fans, but not that much Met stuff. And then you do have Jesse Orosco. Don't forget him, Bob Apodaca, and Skip Lockwood. God, I loved Skip Lockwood. He had the best baseball card. But yes, Chal, I understand your frustration with your sex life as well as with the Mets. And now we've got my friend Ezra, the roving reporter. I don't know. He sounds a lot like Adam to me.
Ezra von Mermelschwanz, your roving reporter, checking in on number 99. It's not only that he's having such an amazing year, and that may very well be better than the greatest of all in 22, but it's by how far he's better than everybody else in the league. He really belongs in another level, and that's what I find incredible.
Ezra von Marmelschwanz, which stands for Marble Dick in Yiddish, he's absolutely correct. And if you look at the numbers that I just spewed, which no, not everybody likes to hear all those numbers, but since I'm sitting here by myself with all my friends, all I can do is spew forth numbers. Absolutely, Judge is head and shoulders above anybody in baseball this season. The closest is Bobby Witt Jr., and I showed you in the stats. Bobby Witt Jr. right now is basically shining Judge's shoes. Gunnar Henderson's fallen off, and Marcell Ozuna, who's having an amazing season for the Braves at 309 with 37 homers and 98 RBIs, and OPS of 965, has an OPS that's 130 points lower than Aaron Judge's, and he could possibly win the Triple Crown. By the way, in the American League, with regard to the Triple Crown, Judge is at 333, Bobby Witt's at 346. Judge has 51 homers. The next closest in home runs is Santander, who I think has how many home runs does Santander have? Santander has 38 home runs, so he's not catching Judge. And as far as RBIs, Judge has 123, and Manny Ramirez has 104. So I don't really think Jose Ramirez, who is what a great player, is 104 RBIs. Getting back to Bobby Witt Jr., he not only has Perez on his team, but he's got Vinny Pasquantino on his team, who's having a fantastic season with 97 RBIs as well. And he's only struck out 70 times in 492 at bats. So there's a lot of good players that are out there. So there's nobody that's having a season anything close to Judge, and Ezra got it right, and I think the stats prove him out. See what else Ezra has to say.
Ezra von Mermelschwanz, still on the road. More on number 99. I just took a look. Bobby Witt is having a downturn right now. Lost 20 points on his batting average. Now 11 points between them. He's got a 19 RBI lead and a 9 home run lead. He gets hot, he could win the Triple Crown. What are your thoughts?
So I quickly clicked through to Bobby Witt's stats while Ezra was slowly speaking. And I'm looking at his last 30 games. He's not really slumping. He's had a 358 average with a 431 on base percentage and a 717 slugging. Is his on base and his slugging with Judges? No, but at a 358 batting average, that's not a slump. In his last 15 games, he's hitting 339. That is lower than his current 346. Where he has been slumping is in his last 7 games. And if you call this a slump, in his last 7 games, he's got 3 homers and only 3 RBIs, which means nobody's getting on base. And he's only hitting 286, 8 for 28. So, yeah, that's a little bit of a slump, and his on base is down to 375, and his slugging is still at 679. So his last 7 games, yes, he's had a little bit of a slump. His last 15 games, yes, he's come down from the 360 that he was at, but it's really hard to say that he's slumping significantly. But if Judge can keep hitting like he's hitting, and in this Washington series, Judge hit even though our friends Juan Soto didn't get a hit in the series, Judge kept hitting, even though he had the slowest exit velocity single or exit velocity hit he's ever had in his career in the game yesterday. He's doing pretty good. There's a chance he could win that Triple Crown, as I talked about before. And one last from Ezra before we call it a day.
Ezra back for more on number 99. I wanted to talk about the play on Monday night. I've seen better, but I don't think I've ever seen it done with such grace. It was also the delta between outcomes. The idea of a home run becomes an out, it's bad enough, but a home run becomes double play that gets you out of the inning is altogether different. Just amazing.
So for those of you who don't know, Aaron Judge made a play in the game against the Nationals when Cortez was pitching. There was a man on first, and Judge went back to the fence and robbed a home run from the Nationals player, came up off the fence, showed the ball, made a perfect throw. And when I say perfect throw, I mean Gleyber Torres had his glove up next to him exactly as you're supposed to have it when you're the cutoff man, and did not need to move his glove. Grabbed it, and even though Gleyber is not exactly a baseball IQ savant, he made a great throw to first base to double up the runner at first base. Boone, in his classic stupid Booneisms, said it was like Judge hitting his 52nd home run because he robbed them, but that's just a stupid statement. He absolutely made a great play, and I think he made the throw to Gleyber because Verdugo in left field told him to throw the ball to Gleyber. But the fact that he hit Gleyber in the glove right near second base from the warning track in dead center field was amazing. But what I will say about Judge's defensive metrics, listen, he's 6'8", 285 pounds, and his defensive metrics in right field make him one of the best right fielders in baseball. But his defensive metrics this year in center field are actually slightly below average. But that play was extremely above average. So there you have it. The Aaron Judge Show on Yankees Coast to Coast today. He is going to win the AL MVP. He could win the Triple Crown. He could be a top 5 player for WAR in the history of baseball. He could be a top 20 player in the history of baseball in RBIs in a season. He could be a top player in the history of baseball since 1960 in RBIs. Aaron Judge, 2020 stats, on a pace for 62 home runs, 160 RBIs, a 333 batting average, a 467 on-base percentage, a 731 slugging, and a 1.198 OPS, and an OPS plus of 229. Unbelievable season. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. You guys can argue all you want. I don't even think there's a chance Soto has of stealing some votes because people don't want to vote for Judge and they vote for Soto instead. If Judge does not win the MVP this year, anybody that doesn't vote for him should be put in the same basket as the guy that didn't vote for Jeter for being in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying that Jeter is the best Hall of Famer ever, but he did deserve to be a unanimous pick because he is a Hall of Fame player, especially in light of some of the guys that are letting in now. But Judge, is having an MVP season. He's going to win MVP. If there was still a sporting news, he would win Player of the Year. He should be winning Most Valuable Player. He should be winning Player of the Year. He should be winning everything else. Even the season Ohtani's having offensively does not compare to what Judge is doing offensively. And since Ohtani is not pitching and doesn't play any defense, even if you want to argue that Witt plays shortstop and he plays it great and he's going to win a Gold Glove, he's not going to win the MVP. But Ohtani doesn't even play defense, but he should potentially win the MVP unless somebody decides that Ozuna, another DH, deserves to win the MVP in the National League. But Judge is in a league by himself this season, and there is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's our show for today. I'm glad you guys all listened, all 0 of you. But hopefully you'll catch us on YouTube. We do have a Yankees Coast to Coast YouTube page where all of our shows are placed. Next week, our show will be remote. We don't exactly have a schedule yet, but the old fat men that listen to this show from Yankee Fantasy Camp are going to Monterey, not Mexico, but Monterey, California, to play a baseball game, 3 baseball games. And we will make fools of ourselves. Hopefully, we'll be able to figure out how to get some live remotes and some comments from everybody. We're also hoping to have a live remote show on Thursday, September 26th from the Oakland Coliseum for the last game that the A's play there. Between now and then, God knows what the hell we're going to do. But so long for now. What I have to say to all of you is behave yourselves, or at least don't get caught. Thanks a lot for listening.